I just think making hard decisions, codifying this restlessness and finding a way to connect to what makes you tick and your joy, and then being purposeful about it, that was the thing that was like electrifying to me.
That's Alissa Heinerscheid, Vice President of Bud Light for Anheuser-Busch. And this is Make Yourself at Home, the podcast that takes you into the homes of people you admire to show you a side you don't usually get to see. I'm Kristen Twyford, and every week we'll talk to someone at the top of their career to explore holistic success and how work and home are inextricably intertwined. Along the way, we hope to inspire you to live well, whatever that means to you. Make Yourself at Home is presented by Nines, the household management app designed to help you manage your home and everything that comes with it, so you can live with ease. Today, we're in Alissa Heinerscheid's home in New York City, where she lives with her husband and 3 kids. At work, Alissa is the Vice President of Bud Light, tasked with evolving and elevating an iconic brand that was in decline. And she's the first woman to lead Bud Light in the brand's 40-year history. At home, she's a mom who celebrates her kids' wins with a family swag chain, and a cancer survivor who finds her joy paying it forward and coaching other women through the tough moments she's been through herself, like having her 3 kids through surrogacy. During COVID, she started a project called 100 Women in 100 Days, asking each person, what's in your worry box? She says in both work and home, her values are the same. She's motivated by the hard, and she's always looking for depth and meaning. Make Yourself at Home with Alissa Heinerscheid. Alissa, thank you so much for having us into your home. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited you're here. This is so fun.
It is so fun. And for anybody who's listening, Alissa has artwork all behind her from her kids, which I love. Tell me a little bit about your home and why you love it, and sort of set the stage for us about where you're sitting.
Totally. Well, just to paint the picture for our listeners, my littlest son adores rainbows, so we have lots of rainbows. My daughter adores ice cream cones, and so we have sort of a copious amount of ice cream scoops on top of ice cream cones. So my background is all children's art because it makes me happy. But yeah, I'm so excited to be here talking to you about home. And just life in general. This is such a fun opportunity for me. So let's do this.
Me too. So to start out, let's just start there talking about home. Tell me what home means to you.
Yeah. It's funny. Of course, there's sort of the physical manifestation of home and your 4 walls. And I'm a bit of a mutt. I always joke. I've lived in a lot of different physical places, East Coast, West Coast, Texas, boarding schools. But when I think about kind of the consistent red thread for home, for me, it's really about kind of a safe space for moving through hardships, like hard things, messy things, kind of hacking our way through. I mean, I just think that's so crucial for all of us. And I've been through a lot of really hard things. I had stage 3 cancer when I was 25. Skin cancer, and I, as a result, did surrogacy with all 3 of my babies. And I just think we have to create these spaces, and that's sort of the vibe, that I try to bring to my family and to my teens, this sort of safe space to be vulnerable and to be open. And the last thing I'll share is I think it's sometimes funny. I think little me would have been surprised at the places that I sometimes find myself feeling at home. Like I was just a couple of months ago in this very, very serious grown-up boardroom with a lot of men, many of whom were older than me. And I found myself feeling remarkably at home. And it was just because we were all collectively working through these messy, hard things. And my opinion was valued, and they were looking to me for guidance. And I sort of marvel at that sometimes, but yeah, so that's kind of home for me.
Amazing. Well, I think that sets the stage for sort of every moment that I really want to touch on in your life and in your career. I'm sure that boardroom moment happens to you a lot. So we're definitely going to get into that. I also wanted to hear a little bit more. I can imagine getting diagnosed with cancer when you're 25 is a really hard moment to have that happen where, you're just kind of starting
Yeah.
out in your career, you're just starting out in your life. How do you feel like your home kind of carried you through that moment and the people around you kind of carried
Yeah.
you through that?
Yeah. I mean, it was a very, of course, it was a very difficult time. And I think what I really realized, I was looking around, I was grasping for, as I kind of always have, a community, creating
Mm-hmm.
a community, particularly women. Women in community have sort of always been a part of what is my coping system. And what felt so hard and isolating about the cancer diagnosis is I picked my head up, and even in looking around in waiting rooms with other melanoma kind of treatment skin
Mm-hmm.
cancer survivors, I was like, I don't feel like I have anything in common with these people. I'm so much younger. And
Yeah.
it took me a beat to really actually identify and find a way to let the cancer diagnosis in. I think I felt so other about it. I was like, this isn't me. I don't look like the people in this. I'm too young. I'm healthy. I go on runs. I was basically like, I don't identify as a cancer patient. And
Mm-hmm.
it's took me finding through a friend of a friend another young girl, a 22-year-old who had been diagnosed with melanoma skin cancer, that I actually started to let the treatment in and talk about it and process it. Um, and so, yeah, that was a lot about, honestly, was creating an emotional safe space to actually process it with someone and
Mm-hmm.
let it in. It's funny, I also developed a turn of phrase with my then boyfriend, now husband, and my brother, to help them create a safe space for me to process.
Mm-hmm.
I train them to say, are you looking for comfort? Or are you looking for a plan? When I got really sick.
Yep.
Because all the men in my life were coming with plans. And they were like, this is how we're going to address this. And we're going to have this 3-part plan and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, guys, I just need you to sit in this really dark hole with me and comfort me and just say
Mm-hmm.
this was really unfair. And that's the safe space that I need you to come and create. Because otherwise, I don't need a plan right now. I actually just need some comfort. So we
Mm-hmm.
even still do that now in our marriage. My husband will come in and problem solve, and I'll be like, I actually don't need a plan. I actually need comfort. So let's revert back to the comfort zone,
Let's go
you
back
know?
to that. Amazing. And
Yeah,
you
exactly.
really have since then done this for so many others. Like you've really turned around and said, okay, I'm going to support
Yeah.
other people. And have you found yourself applying that same rule when you're working with other women and helping other people through tough times?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, totally. I mean, women in community, that's so important to me. And I think another time when it really sort of came to a head was during COVID. I think for all of us, our world sort of started to unravel, and I found
Mm-hmm.
myself at this incredibly low point. And my husband, he turned to me. I remember it was August of that early COVID summer when we were all like, is the world ending? Is this the apocalypse? Like, what is happening?
Mm-hmm.
And he turned to me and he said, I've never seen you work this hard, and I've never seen you more joyless. So something's got to change.
Yeah.
And it was, once I got over the shock of him saying that to me, it actually sparked such a transformation for me, because I think he sort of gave me this permission to start looking back to the things that gave me joy. He gave me permission to sort of reestablish this community of women that I think we had all just shut off. Like we had hunkered down with our nuclear families, and I wasn't with anyone, talking to anyone. And so I actually, that's where I had this project. That's where this project was born. It's called 100 Women in 100 Days. And it was all sparked from that conversation with my husband, where he was like, you have got to find your pipeline of joy again, or this family
Mm-hmm.
doesn't function. And I realized it was all about connecting again with women and building community. And so I just kind of launched into this thing, started talking. First I started with my college roommates, and then like And then I tried every one of my friends. And then you realize pretty quickly, I was like, well, I'm at 28. I don't really have that many friends. Um, and and so then, it started kind of like fractaling out.
Yeah.
And pretty soon I was talking to total strangers and I asked everybody the same question, which was, what's in your worry box? What's scaring you right now? What are you worried about? And I just think it speaks to kind of how much this community of women during that moment in COVID were seeking vulnerability and honesty, because the level of kind of candor I got from total strangers and my college roommates was pretty much the same. So I think a lot about how, as a woman now, bringing humanity, bringing vulnerability, building relationships, that's actually what powers me, and that's what gives me joy. That's sort of everything that matters.
Absolutely. I think this is such an incredible project, and I think it's just one example of all the ways that you support other women, but it's really cool to hear it, 100 in a row had to be kind of transformative for you. Thinking about when he originally said that to you, was he saying you are working so much just at work, or was he talking about sort of in general, you're giving everything your all, everything is
Yeah.
labor right now?
Yeah. I think he just noticed that I had lost joy. I had lost joy in everything. That I
Mm-hmm.
was sort of going through the motions of parenting and marriage and work. And we were working so hard at it. I mean, we were trying to find housing and we were reestablishing schooling, and the children were so young. And I mean, of course, it's just life kind of coming at you. But I didn't have any joy. I just didn't find any joy in any of it.
Yeah.
That's what he
And
was
then
talking about, I think.
as you started to talk to other women, did you just start to hear that everybody was kind of in the same boat where everybody felt like, they were going through the motions both in their careers and in their homes?
Yeah, it's super interesting. So, just to kind of set the visual stage for these conversations, it
Mm-hmm.
was almost always East Coast women. And so it was usually after they put their kiddos to bed, because they were around kind of like 30 to
Yeah.
50 was my age group. And so that was smack dab in the middle. I was in California of like dinner time. So it really did require an empowerment and a commitment from my husband. I basically missed like 100 dinners, like no joke, in a row. And I was like, you can go fight the broccoli fight. Like, I'm going to be in here asking philosophical questions of women. Um, but we bless him, bless his heart, as we'd say in the South. But yeah, the stories, it's funny. I had an output. I sort of took notes as we were going. Of course, everything was anonymous, but I mapped on this graph intensity and frequency of the themes that I was hearing in the worry box answers. For an example of it is, there were infrequent answers around kind of aging parents and the stress around, my mom has end stage Alzheimer's, my dad is losing his grip. It was less frequent, but incredibly intense for the people who were experiencing it. And then there was sort of this like cohort of people, very frequent, very intense, who were feeling incredibly restless and lost and sort of
Mm-hmm.
alone, and re-examining all of their choices and what were actually, because all of the noise had been stripped away
Yeah.
in our lives. And so you were forced to be internal, like you were forced to self-examine in a way I don't think
Yeah.
many of us had done in a long time. And so all of these women were experiencing a very similar kind of thread. And there were individual stories. So many of them were, of course, very different, but the stories that I sparked to, I think, so much were these women who were in that space of questioning, and had made these difficult decisions and had sort of passed
Mm-hmm.
through these hard, tough questioning times and actually made choices. There was this like, one of them was so amazing. She was this woman, she was a corporate lawyer, and COVID hit. She took her son to a playground and she saw a swastika on her son's playground in her kind of community in Connecticut. And she was like, I actually cannot do what I do every day. I'm going to quit. She quit her corporate law job. She became an anti-hate activist. And now she has recently, since I closed the project, she's run for Congress locally and won. But she's Amazing. I mean, there are these like amazing women. This other woman, she was at a
Wow.
hedge fund. She quit during COVID and she's now a climate change startup because she's like, I actually can't be stressed about money anymore. I'm stressed about the planet and my children, and that's where I'm going to channel my energy.
Yes.
And I just think making hard decisions, codifying this restlessness, and finding a way to connect to what makes you tick and your joy,
Yeah.
and then being purposeful about it, that was the thing that was like electrifying to me. It was just fascinating. It was so cool.
That is so interesting. And I think it really hits on this point of we all have limited time. So how are you going to spend it? As you were going through this, did you find I mean, it's inevitable you had to kind of looking at your own life and saying, is this the choice I really want to be making? Did it change anything that you were doing, or did it make you reflective on certain things that, you started to rethink?
I think a couple things. I think it reminded me to never get too far away from communities of women, from vulnerability and honesty and kind of
Mm-hmm.
hardship. Like that's where I'm most comfortable. So remembering what is your safe space, creating it and sort of staying close to it. But I also think sort of grit and self-determination, it reminded me how strong women are in general and how strong I am as well. Like you can
Mm-hmm.
go from an incredibly joyless place, which is where I started this whole thing. And then it was like profiled in the New Yorker and was successful and it was sort of just this small microcosm of like pursue your energy. We have permission, as a sweet friend of mine says, like we have permission at this point in our lives to pursue what gives us energy and joy. Give yourself that permission and things will happen and success will come from it. So I think yeah, but I don't have a dramatic. I quit my job and I started anti-hate activism, which would be an amazing thing, but I don't quite have that same trajectory. No,
Right. And it sounds like the where you are now is really where you wanted to be. Tell me a little bit
that's
about sort
right.
of how you pictured success before you started all of this, and you were kind of, hitting your stride in a way right before the pandemic. It looks like you were promoted to being a VP at Bud Light or at AB
Yeah,
right before the pandemic. Tell me a little bit about
yeah.
what you pictured for yourself and what you wanted your life to look like before all of this.
Yeah, I mean, I when I sort of was a little girl, it's funny, I've thought a lot about this. There's um there's sort of these narratives and stories I think that families tell about children, and they sort of get these well-worn grooves of stories
Mm-hmm.
and narratives. And I'm going to take us one step back, which is my mom was a hugely formative in sort of impact, of course, on my life. She's sort of my
Mm-hmm.
North Star. She's grit and determination, raised on a real small cattle ranch in Oklahoma, kind of conservative all the way through. But she had this vision for clawing her way out of this life and creating a new broader horizon for herself. And she raised me with very much this, I want my kids to kind of grow where they're planted and do big things and be adaptable.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there was this funny, despite the trailblazery thing, there was this funny traditional value system that I was very much raised with as a little girl.
Yeah.
And that narrative, and I feel like you kind of are vibing with me on this too. You might have this a little bit. That narrative was around like being a sweet little girl and being the social glue and not fomenting conflict. Like we're gentle and we're kind and we're Southerners and like we bring everybody along and we don't ruffle feathers. And so I think little me, that was the narrative that was told. And that was kind of the narrative I told myself until candidly, even just a few years ago, about who I was. And I think it's really empowering now to realize we have the opportunity to change the narratives that I think maybe we were told about or sort of inculcated as little girls and step back and be like, who are we and what do we really stand for? You know?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I think we were really connecting because of, our connection to the South and, being raised in the South and then moving to New York City, I'm sure is a big transition for you. What do you think the moments were that made you kind of rethink that and rethink some of your values? And what were some of those aha moments that made you think like, okay, I think I can change the narrative a little bit?
Oh my gosh. Well, I think I've only started doing it in my 30s, to be
Mm-hmm.
totally honest. I'm 39. It's probably taken me a decade to figure this out. I'm still unraveling it, like the who and the why.
Yeah.
But I have this amazing professional coach, and she said this thing to me, and she said, the number one indicator of your professional choices is your parents. And the number one indicator of your success in those choices is your choice of partner. And she said, for instance, and this is just a slight anecdote, but I think it's fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
My professional coach, her mother was a woman who always struggled with mental illness, grew up kind of in the 80s in the UK. Her dad was an African immigrant, both incredibly smart, but both had a ton of trouble ever realizing their potential because of mental illness and inveterate racism. And she was like, my whole life is devoted to helping people unlock their potential. That has been my parents' impact on me. And we all need to sit back and think about how have our parents' narratives, stories, choices, what are theirs and what are ours, and how can we piece them apart?
Mm-hmm.
And so where I really started kind of feeling inspired was feeling empowered to sort of say, okay, there are certain things that are my mother or my parents, and there are certain things that are me. And so one last thing, it's a great one. I listened to this fabulous Stanford psychologist talk about this personality myth. And she basically said, she's like, listen, there's this myth that you are marrying or choosing a single person and their personality is static. Your personality changes your whole life, your
Mm-hmm.
whole life. Exogenous tragedies, big things, also day to day little things, the choices you make, the people you hang out with. And so I have come back as a touchstone again and again to this belief that we can change who we are. We're changing who we are every single day. And
Yeah.
I'm not the sweet Southern girl anymore. Conflict doesn't scare me in the way it used to,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
And now you have this incredible job with Bud Light. You were the first woman to lead this brand in its 40-year history. This is the largest beer brand in the industry. What does that mean to you? And when you think about your own impact and your own legacy, what do you want that to be, especially when you think about at work, but also outside of work? You know, so many women who are interacting with you and watching your career, and you're raising a daughter. You know, what do you want your impact to be?
I think being the first woman to lead Bud Light, the biggest beer brand kind of in the world, it's been it's humbling, and I'm incredibly grateful. It's taken kind of 41 years for a woman to be in this spot. And I think it's sometimes helpful to just sort of recognize that this is the spot. Like, this is where I think I had maybe even dreamed of being in some kind of position like this. And so
Mm-hmm.
kind of being happy in the here and now is a part of what I'm trying to kind of draw joy and energy
Mm-hmm.
from. And particularly, it's an interesting dynamic as a woman in a very male dominated vice industry like beer. And
Mm-hmm.
it's been a long road, Kristen. It's been tense and hard, but it's also brought a lot of clarity and perspective about kind of who I want to be and how I want to operate in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say the most important thing about this job is that you have to prioritize bringing other people along the way, community and women. I mean, it doesn't mean anything unless I am positively impacting other people. And so that's been just incredibly important to me. My decisions with teams, I mean, I try to build teams of people who maybe nobody else has taken a chance on them. I try to bet on people who haven't had the opportunity, bet on people with similar values as me, who are hungry and want to do great things, but care about each other and protect each other and are kind and good.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I try to bring that, honestly. Female representation in this role has been something I've been really committed to. We can talk a little bit about that if you want, but it's just been ever since I took this job, I wanted to try to move the needle in some small choices along the way to sort of say this matters to me. It's the same when I'm dealing with celebrities or sponsorship or partnerships. It's my commitment to sort of bring others along with me. That's just really important.
Yeah, I do want to talk about that because I think, it was amazing to see a woman at the heart of the Bud Light Super Bowl commercial. And I think there's
Yeah.
probably a lot of ways that, your own background and your own perspective and your own values, the person you are at home impacts and has a ripple effect on the Bud Light brand. Tell me about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think number one, I'm a businesswoman. I had a
Mm-hmm.
really clear job to do when I
Yep.
took over Bud Light. And it was this brand is in decline. It's been in decline for a really long time. And if we do not attract young drinkers to come and drink this brand, there will be no future for Bud Light. So I had this super clear mandate. It's like we need
Mm-hmm.
to evolve and elevate this incredibly iconic brand. And what I brought to that was a belief in, okay, what does evolve and elevate mean? It means inclusivity. It means shifting the tone. It means having a campaign that's truly inclusive and feels lighter and brighter and different and appeals to women and to men.
Mm-hmm.
And representation is at sort of the heart of evolution. You've got to see people who reflect you in the work. And we had this hangover. I mean, Bud Light had been kind of a brand of fratty, kind of out of touch humor. And it was really important that we had another approach. So, long story short, Super Bowl spot, fast forward, I cast an incredible female choreographer who just brought incredibly positive, amazing energy to the spot. We cast Miles Teller and his wife Kelly Teller, but it was really crucial to me that if you see that spot, Kelly is Kelly is the heartbeat of that spot. You're seeing this whole experience through Kelly. She's the beating heart. She, I would sort of argue, is sort of what propels you through that experience. And that was intentional. And then we had another really fun spot. First spot out of the gate was the first time ever we'd had a female protagonist in this really cool, she was sort of cool as hell, bobbing and weaving through a bar. But anyway, listen, I'm not going to pretend that there isn't so much more work to do from a business results perspective and, of course, from a representation perspective. But I feel like you have to put your money where your mouth is when you're trying to evolve a brand and elevate it and bring in new consumers. So that's been incredibly important to me.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. And I love to talk with our guests about how home and work are sort of intertwined. When you think about that, how do you feel like your life at home sets you up for success in your career and then vice versa?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I did this value system exercise with a friend of mine, and we looked at kind of a list of 50 values.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, what are the values that are true for you both at work and at home? And like, let's kind of do our homework and come back together and talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And my value system that spanned both, number one was kind of achievement and challenge. Like that gets my motor running.
Yeah.
And I think that's really true, honestly, for work and at home. My mother always looks at my life here when she visits me and she's like, honey, it doesn't always have to be this hard. Because I've got like three kids in three schools and,
Right.
it's New York and I don't have a backyard. And,
Yep.
and she's like, honey, why nobody else makes these kinds of decisions? And it's true. I think I'm sort of motivated by the hard. I run at it, by the challenge. But then the other sort of value system that permeated both was really depth and meaning. And it's so important to me to be connected to the people on my teams, to even the communities, the sponsorships, the leagues, the people that are the agencies, the people that are my sort of web at work. I need to know what makes them tick and I need to protect them. I need to know where their joy comes from, and we can be more efficient as a team together. So depth and meaning is really important at work. And it's also just incredibly crucial, as we sort of talked about with 100 Women, 100 Days. I'm at my best when I feel like I am connecting in a truly meaningful way with people around me. So it's been funny it hits differently, I would say, too, as a mom, thinking about those value system kind of, because you've got to take your value system and operationalize it at home. Like you got to create a routine where your kiddos are feeling every day the stuff that you want them to feel, like the value system. That's actually, I'm a firm believer, kind of as a mom and as a wife, as a professional, your impact is forged in the micro moments, in like these little everyday decisions that you're making. I'm not going to revolutionize my parenting by showing up to my daughter's ballet concert. I'm actually going to have changed her trajectory because I brush teeth with her every night, you know?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Um, and so value system at home for us has been a lot about celebrating the wins. They see me work hard, but my husband and I both try to really find space to celebrate the wins. And maybe my husband and I's wins look a little bit different than my children's wins, but we
Yeah.
celebrate them none the same. I'm actually going to show you because I feel like you would enjoy this. My husband bought this swag chain, which is hilarious. It says
Oh.
Team Heinerscheid swag chain. And that's how we celebrate our wins at the dinner table. Like my son, my 6-year-old, just got this because he recited his solar systems poem at school. And so he got to wear it yesterday. And then same with me. Like I was fortunate enough to ring the New York Stock Exchange closing
Mm-hmm.
bell for Super Bowl, and I wore the swag chain that night at dinner. So celebrating wins, I think, is really crucial from a value system perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it also comes back to the hardship piece too. Like
Yeah.
we also don't shy away from hardship stuff at home, clear-eyed and calm. We got to talk about that. It's
Mm-hmm.
the last thing I'll say is just Brooke, my 6-year-old daughter, I was giving her a bath last night and she pulled out her leg and she has a mole on it. And she said, Mom, do you think there's cancer in this mole?
Oh.
And I thought, eek, I've like overdone the hardship discussion. Like maybe my children shouldn't know that I had cancer. But then you sort of realize you're like, no, it's empowering for her to not be too scared of the big stuff. And we
Mm-hmm.
talked about it and I had an answer. And so yeah, I think at home, I try to make sure we have the celebration of the wins, but the vulnerability and the not running from the hard at the end of the day,
Yeah,
you know?
I totally agree. And I love your question, what's in your worry box? I think it's so important that, you kind of address those things that you're worried about and that you're thinking about. Because once you talk about them, it always ends up feeling better. And I think it's very cool that you do that with your kids too. It's like it's okay to have things that you're stressed about and you can work through them. And like you said, you kind of thrive on that challenge.
That's right. That's right. I think, and the companion of the not being scared of the hard, I think is also being really proactive and conscious of the happy and of the joy.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you sort of have to marry with the hardship is also has to be matched with, and here's how I cope, and here's how I move through
Yeah.
it, and here's how I find my joy. Um, I took this fabulous class in college and it was called Happiness. It was like 1,200 people because I think we all signed
Amazing.
up for it thinking it was going to be like a cakewalk.
Yes.
But it was a fabulous class. And one of the things, and I always tell this to my teams, that was so revolutionary about this happiness class is he had us keep a journal. And for basically 2 weeks straight, our only job was to try to pause when we were feeling really happy and just jot down why. Just pause,
Uh-huh.
jot it down. I just had coffee with Kristen. I just saw my new friend and I think she's fabulous. And our homework was to then start to come back with themes and be more conscious of what are the things that make you happy? What are the
Mm-hmm.
things that bring you joy? And you have to do that. I have had my teammates that are very close to quitting, I know, who are incredibly disengaged.
Yeah.
We do this happiness exercise. I'm like, literally take out your notebook. You're going to give every day for 2 weeks a grade. You're going to say 1, really unhappy, 2, medium happy, 3, happy,
Mm-hmm.
and 1, why. 1, why. And then we look at the average over 2 weeks and we look at the themes and we problem solve. And I don't want to overemphasize the hard because I also think we owe such a debt to ourselves to examine the happiness. And that's why 100 Women, 100 Days became a thing, because I was like, wow, women are my happy place. Vulnerability and realness. I've got to find more of it. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Amazing. And now looking at your life today and looking forward, what are you working on? What's to turn your question back around to you? What's in your worry box now? And what are you striving for now?
I think right now I'm trying to be happy in the now, sort of
Mm-hmm.
exactly appreciating that I am exactly where I need to be right now, which is a very difficult thing, I think, for all of us type A people who are
Mm-hmm.
constantly striving and pushing and thinking about the next.
Yeah.
But I have an incredibly clear job to do
Yeah.
in on Bud Light, on this incredible iconic brand. And I also feel like with my little ones, I am in the foxhole years of marriage. Like we are just one foot in front of the other, barely keeping it together. My poor littlest one, he was supposed to wear his pajamas to school today, totally forgot, missed the email. We're just in it. And I think these years of young children motherhood are really just about working overtime to just survive and be okay with the here and now.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of just, as a friend of mine said, shoulders back, palms open, just appreciating how I feel right now,
Yeah.
um, and this place. But I will tell you, I don't want to sort of leave the impression that that it's all been kind of sunshine and unicorns kind of in getting to this place.
Yeah.
It has been tough and tense and a struggle, and I struggled a ton in the early part of my career with imposter syndrome, just not feeling like I was good enough. And I want to share with you something that I heard, probably the most impactful piece of advice I've ever heard. I went and sat and listened. I was probably 24.
Mm-hmm.
I heard the CMO of GE, this woman, Beth Comstock.
Mm-hmm. I've seen her speak and
I heard
she
her
is
speak, and it
amazing.
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 So I was in a small group, probably 30 girls, and I was
Mm-hmm.
totally fangirling the whole time. I'm like, this woman's amazing. And she opened the forum at the end and she goes, does anybody have any questions?
Yeah.
And this one girl raised her hand and was like, I just want to know, where do you get your confidence from? And I was like, oh, great question. Great question. And Beth stopped the room and was like, I want to pause. I have been asked that question every single time. Every single time I speak to a female audience, I get asked that question. And I have asked Jeff Immelt, my boss, I have asked him, have you ever been asked, where do you get your confidence from? Never. Never once. And she was like, I just think that warrants a beat and a pause of recognition. And I think all of our jobs are sort of on the floor. And she's like, okay, moving on. I will answer that because I actually do have an answer, because it's really hard to be confident in rooms full of men. And so she had this fantastic answer. She talked about faking it, number one.
Mm-hmm.
She was like, I fake it all the time. And you realize the more senior you get, everybody's faking it. And it's so true. Everyone doesn't really know what they're talking about. And then the second thing she said, which I think you've seen as I've been talking, she said, professional coaches have changed my confidence trajectory. She said,
Wow.
I've paid for them. I've asked my company to pay for them. It has been an investment in myself that has paid dividends. And I have found that too.
Hmm.
Um, and so I just want to share that because I think more people need to hear it. It was just such an unlock for me.
Well, now looking forward, when you think about a happy, meaningful life, what does a life well lived look like to you?
Yeah, gosh. I think first and foremost, my family's happiness, raising good humans.
Mm-hmm.
There is just, it hits differently when you're a mother. You can sort of have these kind of fun, over wine discussions with girlfriends on what makes you tick and what makes you happy, but like
Mm-hmm.
rubber meets the road when you're raising tiny humans
Right.
and trying to actually parent in the day to day.
Mm-hmm.
And so a life well lived for me is raising children who are empowered to move through tough stuff and life is going to get really tough. It was really tough for me. Surrogacy was incredibly difficult,
Mm-hmm.
especially because, again, just like cancer, I was so alone. I couldn't find a single person who'd gone through surrogacy, and so you're processing all of these really messy, messy things by yourself. And,
Mm-hmm. And still
think
trying to
about the
get through the
experience.
day at your job and working hard in your
Oh my
career
gosh.
and having your marriage. There's so many different pieces to it.
It was so strange, Kristen. It was sort of like, it, imagine holding space in your worry box for both incredible like appreciation and gratitude and love for this true stranger in your life,
Mm-hmm.
but also resentment and anger that you're at them, that you're even in this position with you're so intimately connected to a complete stranger.
Yep.
Like, and then you're thinking about that in a room where you're trying to present your PowerPoint. It was just such a weird,
So
it was
weird.
such a bizarre experience. It was so weird. And then, fast forward, it's like, how do you experience an ultrasound publicly with others?
Mm-hmm.
And everybody's looking at you being like, isn't this incredible? And you're like, what's performative and what's me? Like, I don't know, what am I supposed to be feeling, but my surrogate is looking to me like I need to react in a way, and I want to give that to her, but I want to be private about how I process this. And think
Yes.
about, I mean, the most intense, think about watching another woman go through labor with your own child. Like, think about the amount of weird things in your brain. Like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Also, like, oh my God, can it end? Like, when can it end? Do I have to
Right.
watch this? Like, it's
Ugh.
so strange. It's so strange. And so I just, I've gotten a lot of real punches in the gut on hard
Yeah.
very early on, but I'm so grateful for them. I'm so grateful
Mm-hmm.
for them. I mean, had I not had surrogacy, I never would have had my children. My cancer at 25, my then boyfriend was like sleeping in a plastic chair next to my hospital bed while I vomited. Like,
Oh
but
my
it was
gosh.
amazing because I look at that now and I'm like, this man is magnificent, and I didn't really know I was going to marry him that much. And then I got sick, and I was like, look at this incredible magnificent man in the face of tough. Like, I've got to lock this man up, even if I end up dying from this. Like, I want to lock this man up, like,
Oh,
let's get married now.
yeah.
But you have to raise, I just think life is so hard, can be so hard, and you have to raise tiny humans who know how to move through it and move past it. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that's success for me. I don't know what kind of hardship Brooke is going to encounter, and my boys, Colin and Owen, but a life well lived will have been to set them up for that. And then I think also building communities of people that feel a, a little bit more permission to be vulnerable and be real
Mm-hmm.
and sort of protect each other and be I hope that through work and showing up every day that I'm having some kind of ripple effect on the communities that I touch and the teams that I build. So just those little things. That's
just
it.
just
That's,
those
I
little
guess, a
things.
life well lived. Just
Well,
those little
I
things.
I just
And I
admire you so
hope,
much. Thank you so
oh,
much. This is just all amazing. And I think it's
of
so
course.
powerful that you not only are setting that example for your own kids and for your own friends and the people who are close to you, but also for your teams at work, and then also through Emerge and the things that you're doing with coaching other women and helping other people, through this. I don't know if we mentioned Emerge as your, tell me a little
Oh
bit about that.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. The surrogacy journey, as we kind of talked about, was for me was incredibly isolating because this was
Mm-hmm.
7 years ago when I jumped in on this. And so probably over the years, I've probably counseled like 50 or 60 women kind of informally through all of these emotional landmines. Like,
Mm-hmm.
how do you find something in common with someone that maybe you don't have many shared experiences with? How do you build intimacy through text? Like, where do you figure out your own line of what you're not willing to give but what you also want to give in gratitude to this person? Like,
Yeah.
there's all these messy monkeys, as I call them at work. There's so many messy monkeys in the surrogacy journey. And so I basically have this service called Emerge, and what we're trying to do is basically help more women through surrogacy
Mm-hmm.
and help them understand kind of how do you navigate this journey, and really the emotional management, the language around this is tough. It's normal to feel these two incredibly conflicting emotions at the same time. Come and talk to me about it. Come and be vulnerable and sit next to me and let's talk about this together. So
Yeah.
just trying to sort of create a space in work and life and all of those things to make sure that I'm giving back to these women, because I think we all sort of feel like paying it forward is such a crucial part of whenever we go through tough stuff, making other people feel a little bit less alone about it. So
Yes.
yeah.
Absolutely. That connection is just invaluable. And I think we all definitely felt that even more over the last couple of years. So it's been
Yeah.
just amazing to hear your story. And thank you so, so much for doing this. I want to get
Oh, of
into
course.
our fun lightning round of home related
Let's do it.
questions. Let's do it.
Great.
Love a lightning round. So, to start out, what's one thing in your home that makes your life easier?
Amazon
Love
delivery
it.
powers working mothers. Oh, I love it so much. I was able to interview the CMO of Amazon, and it was the most profound fangirling I think I ever did, because I was basically like, you have changed my life as a mother. I can't. I think she was a little bit like, okay, that's enough of that energy. But I just was like, I love you so much. She's like, I
Yeah.
don't know you. I thought we were just doing an interview. But yes, Amazon, 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 all
hmm
day long, girl, all day
No
long.
doubt, especially in New York City. I know you spent some time in California during the pandemic. What was one thing that surprised you about life in California compared to New York?
Oh my gosh, so many things. I know this is lightning, so I will be brief. Um, I I was surprised how impactful the quiet was on my psyche, how I could feel my spine kind of unfurling, the stress coming out when you hear birds chirping, the absence of ambient noise. It had a physical manifestation on my body, and it was really powerful. It was really healthy and really powerful.
Amazing. What's the number one reason you wanted to come back to New York?
Relationships, honestly, friendships.
Mm-hmm.
My community was all college and boarding school, and all of my people, the basically the friends that have become family that I raised want to raise children with, are all here.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll share one anecdote. I'll
Sure.
share one anecdote really quickly. Um, One of my favorite women, this woman Joan, who I interviewed in 100 Women, 100 Days, she was on this incredible fellowship journey to be a doctor, children's psychiatrist, really rigorous. She was in Boston. She had her head down, two small children. She told me that her residency, she went to a psych ward for end stage patients, so 80, 90-year
Mm-hmm.
old, end of life. And for 6 months, all she did was sit around and listen to people at the end of their lives. And she was like, you know what they never talked about? Work, accomplishments. They just talked about their families and the people they loved. And that's actually all that mattered at the end of their life. And she used that as fuel to take herself off of that crazy intense track. She moved to the South near her family. She sort of made a totally different life change as a result of that experience. But I think what that experience codified for me was, at the end of my life, these friendships that nurture me in New York will be some of the things that I remember forever. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think that was a bit of my North Star, and I thank Joan for that. But that was sort of my North Star of why I came back.
Yes. Wow. Great answer. What's one thing you're striving to spend your time on or striving to spend more time on, and one thing that you're trying to stop doing?
One thing I'm trying to stop doing is I'm trying to stop over analyzing things in the wake of meetings. I'm
Mm-hmm.
trying to have a shorter memory, basically, is how I would translate that. I think the key to
Yep.
my success is I get out of meetings, and for 3 days, I'm like, I could have been more articulate. That wasn't as effective. And you know what? What a waste of
Mm-hmm.
energy. Holy smokes.
You're the only one thinking
So
about
I'm
it.
really trying to shorten that 3 day. I'm the only one, and you know whose energy is getting wasted? Mine.
Mm-hmm.
Mine. Um, so I am trying to shorten for impact. My earbud just fell out. That's how strongly I feel about that. So I'm trying to shorten my window from 3 days to 3 hours of
Mm-hmm.
memory, of
Mm-hmm.
overthinking and overanalyzing.
Great one. And what's one thing you're trying to spend more time doing?
My depth and meaning with my husband. Depth and meaning with
Mm-hmm.
my husband. He's my number one, and I feel like our life is filled with text messages that all encompass logistics. And so I need to do more about building depth and meaning with the most important person in my life.
Mm-hmm. What's one ritual that you keep in your home that means a lot to you?
Reading, reading every night. Each child chooses a book, and my 6 year olds are in kindergarten. And so they're now able to read a book. Instead of me reading their one book, they read
Oh,
one book to me. So Brooke will read one, Colin will read one, and then I will read Owen, my 3 year old. And they're all in the same room. They have these 3-part bunk beds.
love that.
And they're so freaking cute. And so every night we read, and I would never give it up.
Amazing. What's your household pet peeve?
Ugh. My mother gives me all of these and I hate them so much. It's toys that make noise. There was this toad game. It was like a toad and there were like 7 toads and you like touch them and they just echoed everywhere. And it's in the same way my mother always says, she says, "Oh baby, glitter is every mama's nightmare." And I go,
No
"Mom,
doubt.
no, no. You know what's every mom's nightmare? On Zoom calls, toad games, things that make noise. That is every mama's nightmare. So maybe glitter was the
Mm-hmm.
80s version of a nightmare, and now
Yes.
toads on Zoom calls are the nightmare. So, and I give all women who are listening permission to surreptitiously throw away any of those toys. The amount
Mm-hmm.
of toys that I have thrown away, a couple times my children have wandered in there and been like, "Mommy, why was this in the garbage?" And I'm like, "I don't know.
How did that
That's
get
so
there?
strange. How did that get in there?" So yeah, throw
That's
those away
hilarious.
ASAP. Yeah.
What's one of your own prized possessions?
My grandmother, my father's mother, she gave me her watch before she passed away, and she was kind of a moral compass of mine. She was incredibly strong-minded and thoughtful woman, and I feel like it grounds me. I physically see it and feel it, and there's a grounding effect to having it on my wrist and thinking of her. And so my grandmother's watch.
Love that answer. Who's one person you admire who you think really lives well?
Brene Brown. Oh my
Good
gosh. I
answer.
hope I hope Brene Brown is one of your listeners. I would die.
That would be the
But
best.
Brene, wouldn't it? Wouldn't it?
Tune
Oh
in,
my
Brene.
gosh, fangirl. Tune in. I show her there. She had a recent TikTok that I stole. It's called Candle Blower Outers, and it's about
Mhm.
how you protect people's candles, and that's their soul, and that's their flame, and that's their joy. And I showed it in a like 45-person Super Bowl meeting where we were rehashing how Super Bowl went, and I was like, "Stop, everybody! I'm gonna open the meeting with Brene Brown, and we're gonna all talk about how we protected each other's candles." And I had some
Oh.
agency people being like, "What is happening?" And I'm like, "Y'all don't know me. I'm a Brene Brown disciple. We're going to talk about candles in this meeting." So, yeah,
I love
Brene.
it.
Brene.
Great
Yes.
answer. And what inspires you to live better?
I really try to have gratitude. And I know it's a word a lot of people are talking about right now, but I really try to feel gratitude every day in some real true way. Gratitude for the sunrise colors, gratitude when I'm walking my kids to school really early in the morning on their buses. Just a moment of gratitude inspires me to truly appreciate, gosh, we live life. Like that's an incredible thing to be alive and to be appreciative and experiencing things with others. So just gratitude is the thing that inspires me, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Me too. Well, Alyssa, thank you so much. I have loved this conversation. I really appreciate you having us into your home.
Oh my gosh, Kristen, this has been so much fun. Thank you for having me. Come to my home anytime.
Thank you. We'll be back. Amazing. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you to Alissa Heinerscheid for welcoming us today. Follow along with Alyssa at alyssa.heinerscheid on Instagram. I'm Kristen Twyford, and if you enjoyed our conversation, I hope you'll subscribe to Make Yourself at Home and leave us a review. Make Yourself at Home is presented by Nines. household management software that helps you manage your properties and everything that comes with them, so you can make the most of your time at home. Learn more at ninesliving.com.